Okay, I think what I'll be happy with is having made a difference, especially when I met the different leaders that are here present today. I mean, I've met several leaders and we've had a chance to share our experiences. And some of them have come back to me and said, look, I feel motivated and I feel energized. And I see that what you're doing can be done. And we can replicate what you're doing elsewhere in the world. And I think this is what we bring as Seychelles. We've done a lot of progress in conservation. We've also done a lot of work with different partners, and we've been successful in some and not successful in others. But what we've been successful in, today we can showcase to the world and say, look, it can be done. Conservation can be done, conservation can be sustainable, you can achieve the biodiversity targets, and this is what we've been able to prove. And I think if I walk out of this conference having gained support and understanding that it can be done. What we're talking about here is not something else from outer space. It is something that we can do for the future of the planet and for the future of our own country and our own people. Then I'll be happy.
I guess the questions over biodiversity are issues for us all, but for the Seychelles, it strikes me that this is a problem particularly close to your heart, because tourists travel to the Seychelles and they travel there to see that diverse life.
Yes, definitely. I mean, my biggest challenge today is, for example, with tourism, you have to develop the infrastructure. And sometimes the infrastructure is not very friendly to the environment and to biodiversity. So I spend quite a significant amount of my time and expertise to try and ensure that the tourism development actually benefits the biodiversity, benefits the country, benefits the environment. And this, some people have told me it's impossible, and we've shown that it is possible. Where you have investments from tourism actually enhance the quality of the environment, enhance the protection of species. We've even had endangered species being transformed into vulnerable or become unthreatened as a result of conservation action financed by tourism activities. So we've shown that, as I was mentioning before, that if we really focus on the issues and focus on solutions, we can make progress. The second issue is, of course, coming from outside, and this is, of course, invasive species, global warming. These are the two big challenges, and sometimes you're at a loss because you cannot control the source. You cannot say, look, stop, turn off this pipe or control this. I have to come to the global level. And this is where the important meetings, like the climate change meeting, desertification meetings, and the biodiversity meetings are very important. This is where you can come and, with your voice and make it heard and talk to the people who are responsible for these global issues that we have today and get them to implement concrete time-bound measures to reduce, for example, global emissions of carbon dioxide, which hopefully will reverse global warming, which, as you know, today is affecting many, many small island states, including the Seychelles.
And I guess with tourism, just going back to the concept of sustainable tourism, if I go on holiday to the Seychelles, that will inevitably involve a long flight in a plane. And I suppose when I get there, you know, as a lazy tourist, I might lie on the beach and consume lots of food and drink. Do you genuinely think it is possible to run a tourism industry, particularly at the luxury end, which really respects the environment?
Yes, I think it is possible. You have to look at it in context. For example, when I land in Europe, if I land in Paris, I will use a train, whereas everybody will use a short-haul plane. Now, a short-haul plane consumes more and generates more carbon emissions than a long-haul plane. Long-haul planes usually take a lot of passengers. Now, in our context, sailing by boats or trains is not feasible because we're in the middle of the ocean. So plane is actually the right technology for us. Whereas in Europe, the right technology are trains because they're more efficient in terms of the use of energy. So you have to look at things in the context. Now, in the context of a tourism industry, for example, the energy consumption and the water consumption, we've gone to several lengths to try and implement this at the hotels, within the hotels, to try and reduce, recycle the water, manage recycling of waste. So we have put in place a lot of measures, again being equally sensitive that resources, if they're not managed properly, will have a significant impact on the country. And by the way, the Seychelles depends only on these two economic pillars, tourism and fisheries. Without those two pillars, Seychelles would be, would not exist as it is today. We will not also have the resources to invest in biodiversity conservation because they are linked. I mean, we've had a lot of debates about development and conservation, but they are intricately linked. If somebody doesn't have a job, the person will go into the forest and cut down the trees. And they will, if they don't have money to buy gas, for example, to cook, they will cut down the trees and burn the wood. And these are, we've seen examples around us. So where there is political instability, where there are no jobs, where there are no what we call sustainable jobs, then inevitably people will go and deplete the resources and they will have an impact on the biodiversity. So it is very much linked. So the human dimension of conservation needs to be very carefully taken into consideration when you think about conservation and biodiversity.
This seems to be a conference where people talk a lot to each other. There are lots of meetings in the corridors. What are the most interesting proposals that you have heard since you've been here? What are the most interesting ideas people have come up to you and said, look, if you do this, or if we do this together, this is what we can achieve?
Okay, well, especially yesterday we had our Island Summit. And in our Island Summit yesterday we were quite innovative. We had 4 different groups of people sharing good things, what we call the bright spots. And we had to rotate, and I was there as minister also participating with the different participants. And what came out of there was quite interesting ideas, and one of them was the community in Fiji, for example, where they were doing community work and getting the community itself involved in conservation work, and how they involved the people living up the hillside with the coastal areas. You know, these two groups of people don't understand each other because one goes fishing, goes in the sea, and the other one plants vegetables and trees and whatever. But what they saw is that they have so much in common. What they do impacts on the other, and also, and also the way they do it also can help both of them to become more sustainable in the long term. So harvesting a mangrove forest has an impact on the quality of the fisheries, and fishing too much also has an impact on food security for the people. So it's this kind of integrated approach, looking across different dimensions, across different sectors, that you start to understand, again, what I'm talking about, the human dimension of biodiversity conservation. And I think further work needs to be done for us to be able to come up with practical policies and solutions or management to help those people, you know, take responsibility for their own actions in a very wise and scientific way. And I think this is one of the things that I've gathered from all the Island Summit that we had yesterday, organized by the Global Island Partnership.
Politically, for the Island Summit that you mentioned and your colleagues in the small island states, politically this issue is massive, and I've no doubt that your constituents, your voters would vote you out of office if you didn't take it seriously. But for many other countries, it doesn't have that political imperative. So how do you convey that message to them? How do you build a relationship with ministers from the more developed world and really get your point across that while this isn't a political imperative for them now, it is for you and you need action?
Okay, I think, you know, the problem is we've disconnected everybody from the issues. Today we live in skyscrapers, we live in boxes of artificial, we switch on the light, we don't realize where it's being consumed. We buy a mobile, we buy products, we don't know the kind of pollution that generates this because it's generated far away. Globalization has disconnected the reality of the products that we buy in the shops. We buy kiwi, we don't know it's traveled 1,000 miles before it gets into the shop. We want this, we want that product, we want to have that. So we've disconnected. So when it comes then to implementing certain measures to tell people, look, your consumption patterns, your behavior needs to change because what you're doing is affecting biodiversity elsewhere in the world, people kind of ask the question, I mean, you know, what's going on? I can afford to buy this, so what is the problem with it? So politicians then feel pressured a lot because the consumers don't understand that their actions actually is destroying the whole planet. So I think we need to change the whole approach. We need to help them understand the interconnectedness of the planet today. They need to understand that picking up fruit in India has an impact on them, you know, consuming in Europe and elsewhere. And I know there are benefits of globalization and benefits of trade, but I think we need to see how these benefits are shared equally. We need to see how these benefits do not lead to overconsumption or depletion of a particular resource in a particular area, or does not unfairly create pollution in a particular region to the benefit of another one. So once you start streamlining this, once you start developing an understanding with the politicians, and once you start also education in the schools, and better education on television, better awareness, then I think voters will become much more responsible. And I don't blame them sometimes, because I've traveled to big countries and I understand why they think that way, because they are so disconnected from the rest of the world. And I've had the chance of traveling and going everywhere. So tourism may be also a gateway or a way to educate them but the majority of the population in the larger countries don't travel that much. So for me, that is the paradigm shift that we need to have in order for us to get the voters to change those policies that we have to battle with at each and every convention.
Let's finish with that sort of theme of education. What role can the Seychelles play in, I guess, educating the tourists who visit your islands? I know tourists who come there probably don't want to go back to school when they get off the plane, but you were talking to me before this interview about coral bleaching. What role can you play to really bring it home to these to tourists who may well come from the global north and be quite wealthy and perhaps influential? Look, this is the consequence of what we're doing, and can you really can you really bring it home to them in quite a strong way? Apart from these messages we see in hotels saying that hang your towel up because it's going to take too much energy. How can you really bring that message home?
I think we have to think outside the box. Just like we market the goods that we do, we have to market the environmental goods as well. We have to package them in a way that we don't look, as I mentioned before, tree-hugging conservationists. Because people, when they look at a conservationist, they switch off. They say, this guy is totally irrational. He has 10 commandments, don't do this, don't do that. And I think we have to change that approach. I think we have to be more friendly, the message has to be understanding from the perspective of the tourists as well. They have to have a role to play, and also we have to engage them. For example, we are going to start a tourism tree planting campaign where we get the tourists themselves to come and plant trees, get them engaged, get them involved in when they do the diving, they can do the monitoring as well. They can help us do the research. They can also see the recovery. We can explain to them why is this recovering, why is this not recovering. So instead of just taking a pleasure dive, it's also an educational dive without feeling that you are going back to school. And I think this is where we need to look at innovative approaches of really reaching out to them, just like with anybody, in a way that they feel educated, they feel they've learned something, but in a way that they don't feel that we are kind of imposing or kind of giving them a list of commandments.